Republicans sure love to talk about free speech and how the First Amendment is basically under assault by liberals and it's the left, it's the cancel culture, right? Yet the same Republicans, at least in Kentucky, are secretly pushing measures to destroy not only free speech, but also protest. So now, for example, there's a bill that's moving through Kentucky's Senate that would actually make it a crime to insult a police officer. Okay. Now, supporters say the bill will target people who unlawfully cross the line during protest. So now, here are some details. Senate Bill 211 mandates up to 3 months of imprisonment for a person who, quote, accosts, insults, taunts, or challenges a law enforcement officer with offensive or derisive words, or makes gestures or other physical contact that would have a direct tendency to provoke a violent response from the perspective of a reasonable and prudent person. Okay, here's the thing, reasonable and prudent person. Now, we expect police officers to be not just reasonable and prudent people, but also I think we should hold them to a higher standard, since they literally have the ability to arrest and murder you and shoot you. And so I think we should hold them to a higher, basically a higher, not regard, but higher standard. I don't think it's too much to ask. But all right, so there's a lot of different things that are involved in this 3-month imprisonment penalty. So let's kind of break this down, okay? So now, if you walk up to a police officer, during a protest, whatever, and you start slapping a police officer, then yeah, of course, that's assault, that's a crime, that's already a crime. That's already criminalized. That is actual assault. And so nobody's going to be surprised. Nobody's going to argue that they shouldn't be, detained, arrested, whatever, to stop that assault. Okay, I think we all kind of understand this, okay? I think we all kind of agree on that little bit of a baseline. You can't go and you can't go and assault, attack, punch, kick, hit a police officer unprovoked. Okay, I think again, we all agree with that. All right. So now they lump that in with calling an officer a bad name. Well, that's very interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely ridiculous. I feel like somebody calling a police officer a slur is something that you should be prepared for if you're a police officer. I feel like that's kind of a part of the job. You have to deal with people who are generally irrational, and you can't go and get your feelings hurt and take things personally because you actually have a job to do. All right, and so I don't feel like you should be able to manhandle or assault a protester and arrest them for that. All right. Hey, I'm sorry, your feelings are hurt because somebody flipped you off during a protest. Sad day, but that doesn't give you the right, or shouldn't give you the right, to throw them in prison. Unfortunately, this law wants to do exactly that. The Republicans in Kentucky want the police to be able to do that. Well, so now for me, obviously my rule is to keep things peaceful. All right, keep it peaceful. I don't like physical violence. I don't like to see that at protests, all right? If you do physical violence against police that is unprovoked, then okay, yeah. And if this bill was just about like that, then it wouldn't be too controversial. Unfortunately, this is not what this is about. This is, again, about protecting essentially snowflakey police. And also essentially criminalizing protest and going after the First Amendment. And so there is more, actually. A person convicted of this misdemeanor charge could also face a $250 fine, as well as the imprisonment, and be disqualified from public assistance benefits for 3 months. Wait. Okay, now. Okay. So they just happen to throw in if you taunt a cop, you lose your public assistance. Who do you think this is aimed towards? Honestly, especially considering it's in Kentucky, which happened to be the site, at least Louisville, one of the biggest protests for BLM recently. I think we know what this is about. This is going after Black Lives Matter. Now, and they're doing it in one of the more racist ways for certain. Hey, insult a cop, not only you go to prison, but you're getting your benefits cut off. Wow. Now, it's also, by the way, a direct pushback on defund the police. Now, the bill has a provision stating that the government entities that fund law enforcement agencies must, quote, maintain and improve their respective financial support. Not only are we going to continue funding the police, and we expect the government to continue funding the police, but also we are going to ask to expand our funding because, of course, we need more MRATs, we need more Bearcats, we need more military arms. And so we want all that stuff so we can protect and serve the shit out of you. Yes, of course. Now, again, it's a controversial thing, apparently to some people, but I think defunding the police is actually a pretty good idea. You know why? Because it doesn't mean eliminate police. It actually means take some of the funding away from enforcement and put it into things that would actually help reduce crime, making the police officer's job actually easier. I know, right? And of course, you take some of that funding that would go to, busting people's heads open and put it towards actually alleviating poverty, helping, mental health, helping get people access to mental health that need it, even instituting job training programs or even benefits for companies to move into these areas that are heavily policed right now, that are African-American, to help, get rid of those, crimes of desperation. Because there is an issue where people in these communities, they've got nowhere to go. They've got nothing that they can do, nothing to help them escape this crushing poverty. And so what happens? A lot of people end up having to turn to crime to be able to make ends meet, to be able to get out of that life. And that's unfortunate because they end up getting into a worse life that ends up with violence and drugs and prison anyway. And so that's not good. We need to give people opportunity. Instead, what a lot of these right-wingers want to do is give police the opportunity to bust their heads and put people in prison. And of course, that's not good as well. So, all right. Now, that said, one of the things that they could also do with money that they would take from defunding the police, which again would actually, the ultimate goal is to have police not do everything they're doing now, but actually just to go and do what they're supposed to be doing by a modern context. And that's, of course, not only being a deterrent to crime, but also investigating violent crimes, murders, rapes, etc. That's what they're supposed to be doing. But they're not. They're investigating mental health disturbances, going on wellness checks, and people end up being killed, unfortunately, because police aren't actually trained to do any of that stuff. That said, as far as alleviating poverty, remember, Stockton recently gave people literally like $500 a month to do nothing. And what happened? Well, they ended up actually becoming more employed and doing better materially. People's lives got better. They ended up getting better jobs. There was less crime. It turns out that when you alleviate poverty, a lot of wonderful things happen. Good things, great things, tremendous things. Instead of course, more police, more violence. All right. So, and I think that's, again, what we should be doing is helping people materially and that, and improve their quality of life. But instead, Kentucky says, no, what we're going to do is we're actually going to destroy the Constitution. Oh, lovely. And I mentioned snowflakey behavior. So now one of the people that push, this bill forward as a co-sponsor, this is State Senator David Carroll. So now CBS published this story. That's where I get it from. And he's a Republican and retired police officer who's, sponsored this bill. And basically he wrote an email to CBS and saying, quote, After looking at your headline, I don't think I have anything to say to you. I missed a time when we actually had unbiased journalists. Oh, you mean people who were essentially stenographers for police and the government? I think that's what you miss, where they would, oh, a police officer said it. Well, must be they must be 100% telling the truth, even though there are times essentially where police have been caught not telling the truth, where police have lied, planted evidence on people, used arrest quotas, things like that. And basically they did this, this thin blue line or whatever, where they would go and protect the bad police officers from ever getting in trouble. So I think he misses a time when the police, when journalists, when members of the media would not criticize police at all, any police actions, and automatically take everything that a police officer says at face value without actually, doing any sort of investigation. That's what he missed. All right. That's what he missed. So now, and that said, Carroll did tell the Louisville Courier-Journal that the bill is in response to riots that broke out in cities across the country last summer. So there were riots. Yes. In some cases, those riots were instigated by police officers that would attack peaceful protesters. In other cases, of course, it is just a result of the population that it was acting out in frustration and anger. That's not to excuse what they're doing, but it is a result of that. There's only so much you can push a population, push a community before they start to act out. And of course, these police officers, generally, they just respond to that with crushing the population even more. Again, a lot of these communities that have risen up as a result of this, of violence against African Americans have done so because they over-police African American areas. All right. So now, again, their anger, not the actions, by the way, and I'm for peaceful protest, but their actions are justified. I'm sorry, the anger is justified. The actions are not. And especially in Louisville and Kentucky. In Louisville, what happened last year? Breonna Taylor was killed by Louisville police officers during a raid. So I talked about that for quite some time. Breonna Taylor, of course, had not committed any crimes. She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't violent. She wasn't resisting police. She was an innocent bystander shot to death. Her boyfriend, by the way, who was armed, and he had he was a legal gun owner. He was protecting himself against what he thought were plainclothes, people that might have been related to her ex-boyfriend, who was a drug dealer. And so he, people busted into the apartment. He did not hear them when they said, "Oh, we're the police." That wasn't loud enough. He couldn't hear it. He fought in self-defense, and actually ended up being acquitted for this, which again is good, because again, he just thought that he was doing self-defense. Interesting how no Republicans, no NRA members went to the side of this man for simply defending himself against tyrannical government. It's a horrible injustice, lack of justice. And again, that lack of justice was enough to push people over the edge and get them out into streets. And Kentucky responds by not re-examining police procedures. Louisville, they banned no-knock warrants, but the Kentucky legislature, which is all Republican held, by the way, they decided to criminalize protest or attempt to in any way that they could. And again, I got to mention, assaulting a police officer is already a crime. You don't need to double criminalize that, double penalize that. All right. But Carroll's gonna talk more to the Courier-Journal. In fact, here's what he said. Quote, "This country was built on lawful protest, and it's something that we must maintain our citizens' right to do so. What this deals with are those who cross the line and commit criminal acts." Acts that are already criminalized, you are recriminalizing again. That doesn't make sense. But here's the other thing. I'm going to contest the notion that our country was built on lawful protest. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't at all. No. Our country is built on riots. The Boston Tea Party, literal destruction of property, of corporate property. All right. Look at the history of labor struggles in this country. We have a very violent history. Today's protests are actually incredibly tame. And by the way, police have traditionally been used to crack down on labor organization, on labor movements, and also racial justice movements. So there's no surprise here, okay? But they're definitely going after free speech. This is what this is. They're going after freedom of assembly, protest. It's the literal definition of ending free speech protections, okay? Letting the government come after you and arrest you for literally calling someone a bad name. I mean, look, it's almost comical how Republicans don't actually believe in free speech at all, but think that it's somebody's right to be on Twitter or on a TV show, even if they say like horrible things, anti-Semitic, anti-trans things, but think it's also totally cool for a cop to beat your face in for calling them a bad name. Great. Double standards much. But again, there's a method here. There's a purpose to it. And that the ACLU of Kentucky had called this legislation, quote, an extreme bill to stifle dissent, and said that the result would be to criminalize free speech. 100%. And it's, of course, to criminalize free speech for certain kinds of people and protest. They don't want black people. They don't want indigenous people, like we saw at the pipeline protests, to be able to actually protest, because it turns out that striving for racial justice and environmental justice are things that are incredibly popular with the American people. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.